So we have invited Gerard and Sherry to come back and have a seat. And we'd like to open it up for anyone here who may have some questions for our panelists. We just ask you to please be respectful of the time in order for us to hear as many people as possible. We ask you to be respectful of the time. So there's a microphone in the middle right here, and everyone is open to using it. If you are unable to speak or share, please know that you can provide a statement to the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, who are here at the gathering collecting statements. So if you feel shy, if you feel overwhelmed and don't want to speak and share this way, know that there are people here that can help you with your statement. Ate.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Carrier from the Manitoba Media Federation. I want to, first of all, thank you very much for that very interesting, informative presentation. My question to you is that the child's bone that you found, were you able to find out the time period of when the child was deceased? And were you able to find any indication as to the relative or which community that child was from? Thank you.
Okay, the time period from the coroner's office, the way it was explained to me is that they can only date radiocarbon dating from 1950 forwards. So the only confirmation of the actual age of the bones is that we know that it's older than 1950, because radiocarbon dating has a cutoff date of around the 50s. Has to do with the carbon and bombs. They gave me some big radioactive explanation about it. So it's from anywhere from 1950 and 150 plus years or minus years back. So from what we were told, it could be anywhere in that time period, but they wanted to guess at about around the 1890s. That's what we were informed of, that it was roughly around that time period. So in our presentation, that's where we showed that old picture of the original school with the teepees in front. That would have been roughly about the timeline that we assumed that the child was, the remains were from, that time period there. And then there was a second part to your question. What was it?
The relatives of the deceased child. So
right.
I think at this point we don't have a method of determining whether or not we can find the families or the community of the child unless we have some sort of DNA sample or community mass sample that we can pull from, because in some instances the tooth can still extract some DNA. But I think we need like massive databases in order to make a distinct hit on where they come from, because I don't think you can even manage family with something that old, hey?
From what we were told, it would be a huge undertaking, because in order to try and find family related to it, we would have to have a massive database of DNA results from all across Canada, because we had people go to the QIRS from up north here, actually. We got called a couple of years ago from somebody up here in Nunavut, or was it Yukon? It might have been the Yukon. They contacted us and asked us if we had found any information on 2 Inuit children that had come down to the residential school and had never returned home. So we're kind of looking for that. We're watching as we go through our records for any reference to those children. So there's really no easy way to determine who the family might be for those remains, unfortunately.
If I may, I have a follow-up question. Was there at least a ceremony done for this child's with the remains?
Yes. As I mentioned, we like to stress a lot that you follow your cultural protocols, and in Star Blanket, we're pretty heavy on our ceremonies and our teachings. So for us, we're losing our elders at a fast rate back home. So we brought in somebody that we listened to and follow from Rocky Boy, one of our brothers. His name is Harlan. He came up and he helped us do a ceremony and have a feast, and we interred the remains of the child in our our cemetery located on the main reserve of Star Blanket. So this child is amongst our people right now. And it's better than having them there on the site. So I think that's probably going to be our protocol moving forward when we find more remains, is we'll bring them if they come up. That is, because our community has said, we have very strong teachings from a Nehio perspective when it comes to funerals and when it comes to how we deal with the dead, I should say. And one of those teachings is that you don't touch them, you don't bother them where they are. So that's the direction that our community and our elders have told us. So we can't dig up any remains. So even if we confirm that these different anomalies are in fact human remains, we can't disturb them because our elders have given that direction to us. In this case, it just so happened that the gopher brought up the remains for us, so we were able to bring up that our cultural advisor, and he was able to help us through that ceremony on how we will deal with the dead properly and inter them into our cemetery. So that's where we stand right now at our site anyway.
Nature is helping to reveal the truth.
Bonjour. We de kwedang in the gon shabe kwenda gigondo de ma web chikegin in ninginot magna. You come kongini Benjaji, Ontario, Manitoulin Island. I just have a simple question in regards to the Indian residential school property and the building itself, the lands. Are those under complete ownership of the Star Blanket Cree Nation? Like, do you have full control over what happens there, from like even with the searches?
Yeah, so I kind of really rushed through our presentation, but I did mention that in 1984, Star Blanket went through the treaty land entitlement process, and it was through TLE that the site of the QIRS and its surrounding grounds, like the farm, there was agricultural land as well that was connected to the school. Those all came under our treaty land entitlement, so they're our sub-reserve that we call Wapimustusis. So it's all under Star Blanket's domain. The part that isn't under our area of jurisdiction would be the seminary across the lake that we were talking about, but we do have plans to work with the private owners over there so that we can go and scan over there as well, because we have a lot of stories of students being over there. And then when the fires happened in our schools, they housed our boys across over at that pre-seminary. So we have to work with our local private landowners across there, because it's all developed on that side today. They have housing development there, and people are living on the site of that old seminary. There's only one parcel of land that's untouched, and it's the original garden that was attached to that seminary. So we're looking at possibly going through Heritage Canada to have it designated as a heritage site to protect it, because when we go there, I don't have pictures in our presentation, but I do have pictures of that garden, and you can see the stones. So we have an old church, and it's made out of these stones, and we have stories of how it was the students at the school that hauled those stones and helped build that church, and they did the same thing for the seminary. They hauled those stones and they built that garden with all the student labor, the slave labor. Like, let's be honest, that's what it was. It was slave labor.
So is there also a cemetery on the property?
No, there's no cemetery by our school, but when you go down a couple of blocks, because it's a town of LeBret. We're right situated beside this town of LeBret. It used to be in LeBret, so it was called the LeBret Industrial School or the LeBret Indian Residential School. The church is about 4 blocks away from the school, so it's quite a distance, and then the church itself has a cemetery all around it. And the oldest part of the cemetery is kind of near the border of our lands. So our land is what you saw in the video, and our track and field, when it was a school, there was a track and field there. We had a big track area, and it's right up against the church. So we've been able to scan right up against to the cemetery, where there's an actual cemetery. But where the remains were found was actually on an area near where we had a ball diamond. Like, we had students and youth, children playing on that track and field and playing in that ball diamond, and there was not supposed to be a cemetery where those remains were found. So it was farther away. And then at the seminary, there was a cemetery, and that cemetery was built onto the side of the hills because we're in a valley, so Qu'Appelle Valley, it's called, and the cemetery across by the seminary was built into the side of the hills. So I think it was in the 70s or 80s, there was a lot of rain, and because it's hills, it started to erode, so the caskets, you could see them sticking out of the hills. So they had to transplant those what are they called? Caskets. They had to transplant all the caskets that were there over into the Lebret Cemetery. And those were some of the priests that worked at the QIRS school. So that's where another known cemetery is. But other than that, no, we didn't have any other cemeteries around us.
Okay, miigwech.
I have a quick question. The area that was developed, there's houses there now? Are they private homes of indigenous owners or non-indigenous?
Well, the development across the lake, that's privately owned. So it was developed by like real estate agencies, and then they sold it off to private owners, private house owners, and that's the seminary part. But our land, it's gone through a bunch of different like construction periods. So when my grandmother went to QIRS back in the 50s, I guess she went for all of the 50s, really, my grandmother. And she said that the place where a lot of our houses are, which we didn't actually have a picture of, because it's across the tracks. So there's a track that runs right parallel to our school, and then there's the highway, and then it's on the other side of the highway that there's more land. And when my grandmother went to school, that was the farming area. It was all agricultural land, and there was a barn there, and they just planted their gardens, she said. But now, then over the years, they stopped doing the agricultural work, and they actually became a school and started teaching actual subjects like in the 80s. So when it's turned over to the First Nations people, to our people, because it was Star Blanket Band members that sat on that board. Some of our File Hills people sat on that board too. And they started to build houses on that agricultural part. So it's developed as a subdivision, I guess, of Wappi, but it's still First Nation owned, so that's reserve land. So they're all First Nations. All of our own people, our band members, live in that part of the development. And then right on the school itself, on the school site, where the priests' quarters used to be, and some of the nuns' quarters, those are all built over with new complexes. So where Gerard lives is kind of where the priests' houses used to be. And so he lives basically in that area, right there where the priests used to dwell. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I was wondering how difficult it would be to scan those areas if they were already privately owned land.
Yeah, it's going to be, well, the owners across the lake are actually pretty cooperative. We have a relationship with a few of the owners across the lake already, and they've been kind of preparing their neighbors for us to come over there. So they are aware. The community of Fort Qu'Appelle is working with us. A lot of the community, like non-Indigenous community around Fort Qu'Appelle, the Belcaris area, they're all very supportive in what we're doing. And the church, because it was a Roman Catholic run residential school, they've been working with us as well, the Archdiocese. So it has some challenges, but for the most part, it's through reconciliation. Like, we're building those bridges, we're working with people, we're making those relationships and those connections, and it's going easier because of that.
That's great.
So, thank you, thank you for that presentation. I'm glad that I'm here to see that he also had a priest in there that I think was in Alacross that used to build these buildings, and they called this building Taché Hall. So I was kind of intrigued when I saw that. I saw Father Taché, so I'm just wondering, that priest, he must have went from one place to the next. Father Taché, I'm not, because they named the building right after him in Alacross. They called it Taché Hall. That's where we used to go to movies. And it's evidence for us because they didn't accept our residential school. So you have all the information regarding Father being in your community, right?
So what we found as we were doing our research on our school, Father Taché was actually Bishop Taché. He came into the area, and he's credited with being one of the first priests to find, I guess, to settle the area, because that one picture where there's the little church on the hill and then there's the big church on the bottom, well, there's a cross built at the top of that hill behind the church that you can't see in the photo, and that's where Bishop Taché came into Qu'Appelle Valley for the first time, and they erected that cross there to mark that was the first time that somebody came into Qu'Appelle. Well, somebody came for the first time, right? Because we've been there for hundreds of years, thousands of years, if that. But that was the first time that this white man came into the Qu'Appelle area and stomped his cross there and said, yep, this is a good site. We're going to build a mission here. So that's what they did. That's what Father Taché did. He created a mission there. So that lake that they would cross to come from the seminary, that's called Mission Lake, in honor of that mission that they created. And then that mission right there, that Catholic mission, was actually part of a larger mission, which included northern areas. So that's what Taché did. He just went around basically starting missions, essentially. That's what we found in our research anyway.
So his first name was Alexander, something like that. And the other thing I was just thinking about when that Taché it might be buried in Alacross. I think I have to go check in a graveyard. I think for sure he's buried there, but I'll find out anyway. I'll give you my card anyway, so we can exchange information in the future. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for the questions and the information.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question to our panelists?
And just before George speaks, I've been dominating everything because I was the lead researcher before I was the project coordinator. So sorry about that, George. You can answer this one.
Okay, so I'm from Chisasibi, George Pachano. Thanks for the shout out, Gerard. I put out away the tomatoes and the veggies that were for you. You mentioned a little bit about the media, because this file is being followed nationally.
Can you speak closer to the mic? Thank you. You can take it off.
Short people here, eh? They haven't met Crease. So the file is being followed, like nationally and internationally. We get calls from reporters from everywhere. I had a couple of weeks ago somebody from France. I don't know why she called us. But you mentioned, I don't know, maybe there's, you mentioned media training. How did you guys handle all your PR, or did you have somebody answer the questions? Because there's always possibility for misinformation. That's what I find.
Mm-hmm. We actually hired a full-time media advisor, and she worked had a lengthy career with, I believe, CBC and CTV. So she knew the ins and outs of media, and she told us and trained us on what to say and what not to say to avoid any of that misinformation that might come out, especially when cameras are rolling and people can take things out of context and stuff. So we went through a couple of good weeks of training with that, and then throughout the process, even right up until the news release, we actually had to prep ourselves and prep our security and the rest of our team to guide all the questions to Cherish at that time, and also to Chief Michael Starr or Sheldon Poitras.
Yeah, that was one of her, one of the things that she stresses is that if for your IRS teams, you need to designate your people that are going to be able to speak to the public. Like, don't just let anybody on your team speak. You need to have somebody designated. So for our teams, that was Chief Mike and my husband Sheldon. He was the designated, the two designated spokespersons. So that's why you had Sheldon speaking in the press conference, and then afterwards, a lot of the additional press, like we had different CBC Radio News and CTV and APTN, all these other reporters come afterwards. They were directed to Chief Mike, and to Sheldon. So designate somebody to be the voice, somebody who's going to understand how to carve your message, to give that message in a good way, because there's some things that your team will want to share, and then there's some things that your team shouldn't share, that you need to keep confidential, and you don't want somebody with loose lips.
So don't call me, I'll tell them. Thank you.
There was somebody over here that wanted to ask a question.
I watched the video there. I was curious about the tunnels and what they were being used for. Do you ever hear anything in your history of that school about experiments on kids? Or nurses that were on staff? I don't know about that time, but...
We never had any nurses. Our site was run by the RC Church, so it was the Oblates, like many others, and it was the Grey Nuns. So we had Grey Nuns on site as well, and it was the Grey Nuns that would have administered to the girls. And that underground room that Sheldon is speaking about in the video, he said that when he went in there, that he saw like a medical gurney. And he explained it a little bit in there, but when he talked with me about it, he also said that gurney had like stirrups, like for women to put their feet on when they go to the doctor. So we've heard of different experiments. We've heard of, I know we have some stories of like dental things happening to our people that went there, and nutrition. We had a TB experiment done. There's actually a published document on that TB experiment that was done amongst our children. We found it in the Regina Provincial Archives for Saskatchewan, and it talks about the nutrition and the diet of the students, and the bovine TB strain, and how they used it on their children. I can't remember the exact details of it, but it was quite shocking when I came across it. So we did find like evidence of that kind of experimentation going on in the children. The thing though that I found a little interesting about that is that I don't know how much our people knew at the time, but the news articles would show pictures of our local chiefs honoring that doctor who did that experiment, because he brought muskegee, like medicine, to the people to help with that TB. So I'm not sure if that was just like a twist by the media on what was going on, or if they fully understood what kind of experimentation was going on the children in the residential school at the time. But yeah, I had a lot, and that was only up until it started to be run by our First Nation board, like when we started to have a lot of our band members go on to that board. Then once the church withdrew, obviously there was no more experimentation going on.
And what about the ex-convicts? How did they manage to come into the picture as teachers? Like, do you have a real long history or any documentations as to why they would hire ex-convicts to look after children's education?
I think that was from one of our researchers. Her name is Del Bebo. She came across some documentation in some of the archives. I can't remember exactly which archive. The Grey Nuns, in the Grey Nun archives when we went there, talking about how some of the priests, before they became priests, they were basically ex-convicts. They went into the seminary, and then they were trained, and then they were sent out into the residential schools. So some of them had like a criminal history, because they were given a choice whether you serve your time or you go into the priesthood. And then, so that's what she was finding.
That's a pretty scary concept, but thank you.
Also, to add a little bit, some of the staff that were hired as teachers were just people that were doing some of the work in the schools, because they're having trouble finding staff for teaching kids. So if somebody did maybe some housekeeping or cleaning, they'll be like, well, they have some experience, maybe we can use them as a teacher, and they just pull in whoever with no previous teaching experience.
One last question, if anyone has any.
I just wanted to add a comment, because I've spent my time in researching too as well for my home community in northern Manitoba. And in some of the documentation, like I can add to what they're saying, was like they were criminals, some of the priests in the old world, but they were promised a new life. And so for them to get acceptance into the new life, they had to join the priesthood. So I just wanted to add on to that, like to help with this, because I've seen it myself in research. And so that's all I wanted to say. But you guys did such an amazing job, and I'm so glad to have been part of this. And I feel like everything you guys are saying is very important information to these search teams that are starting, because there is so much work that we need to do. And even just being here, listening to the stories of the North, there is a lot of work to do. Like watching from down there, listening to up here, we're like so far apart, but yet so together. And so I just wanted to, I guess, acknowledge everybody in this room for all the work that we're doing. And I appreciate you all, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks. That's Lisa Muswagan.
Thank you.
She's from Cross Lake.
Thank
And
you,
if you
Lisa.
want some new music on your playlist, download The Resilience.
We have a pretty good relationship with Cross Lake because the first principal at our site, his name was Father Huguenard. We kind of showed him in our video and our presentation. And Father Huguenard went from our site up to Cross Lake and worked at their residential school and did things up there. And then he came back down. So that's kind of why Cross Lake reached out to us and asked us for some guidance when they first started up on their residential school search project. But I've known Lisa longer than that. We went to the Olympics together in 2010.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you're sharing and for answering everyone's question and for doing all that hard work for your community.
Yes. Thank you for inviting us and having us.
Can we just sit up here?
Hi. Nakurmik.